In this video, we are continuing to review for our midterm by talking about marginal cost / revenue / profit. So I want to begin with one of our midterm practice problems this time. It's question number 2 from our midterm practice problems. So just for reference, so this is problem number 2. It's one of the tier 1 problems from our midterm practice. Alrighty, so let's take a look at the question. So suppose an analyst estimates that the marginal profit for sales of X thousand smartphones is this, given by P prime of X equals this thing, $1,000. Assume your fixed costs for this business are $50,000. Find the profit for selling 10,000 phones. So I want you to begin by pausing the video for 3 minutes to try this question on your own first. That may not be enough time to finish the problem, but it is super important, especially during these midterm review videos, to get that practice solving new questions. And you can get that through these pauses and trying problems. All right, so hopefully you've done that. Hopefully you paused it for about 3 minutes to try this. So let's talk about it together. So the question mentions the fixed costs. The fixed costs are $50,000. Well, the fixed costs are the costs from selling 0 items. So the cost of 0 items. And the cost of 0 items, we can notate that by writing C for cost. Plug 0 in for the number of items. So the cost is supposed to be 50,000, but looking at our function, the function's units are in thousands of dollars. So I should just write 50, because that already tells me, oh, this is $50,000. Those are the units of the question. Okay, and then what does the question want us to find? It says find the profit for selling 10,000 phones. So that means I need to take my profit function and I need to plug in the quantity. The quantity is 10,000, but I have to think about units as well. It says that X is in thousands of smartphones. So I need to plug in 10 rather than 10,000. Okay, so the reason for this is because X is in thousands. So because I will need to find P of 10, and I'm given P prime of X, I'm going to need to take the antiderivative to get us started. So let's take the antiderivative of P prime of X. So if I do that, that'll give me P of X, the profit function. So I'll write the integral of 3x e to the negative x over 10 dx. Alrighty. So now to do this antiderivative, I need to use integration by parts. Okay, so I need to use integration by parts. Let's write down what u is and what dv is. Let's choose those. And once I choose those, then I'll be able to say what du and v are. So when I do integration by parts, I want to choose u in such a way that its derivative is simpler than it. So I'm going to let u be 3x and dv be the other stuff, e to the negative x over 10 dx. So then du is 3, and I have to write a dx next to it. And antiderivative of e to the negative x over 10, let's see, so it's going to be helpful to think of this exponent as negative 1/10 x. So an antiderivative of that would be e to the negative 1 over 10 x. But in front of it, I'll have to reciprocal this negative 1/10, which means I'll have to put a negative 10 in front of it. All right, and I'm just going to put this kind of off to the side. I'm going to put a little bubble around this choice of u and dv here. So one tip-off to possibly try integration by parts for an integral like this is the fact that I have a product of 2 functions. That's not to say that when I have a product of 2 functions, I always want to use integration by parts. Sometimes we don't. Sometimes we can do u sub. Sometimes I can simplify it. But it's an indicator that I may want to try it. And then the other sort of tip off is experience. Hopefully now that we've done some of these integration by parts problems, we're getting a little bit better at recognizing that, oh yeah, that's the way to go, as opposed to a different technique. And we're getting a little bit better at recognizing what are the parts. What do we let U be? What do we let dV be? Okay, so let's apply integration by parts. So we'll get P of x equals UV. It's 3x times negative 10 e to the negative x over 10 minus integral of v du. So negative 10 e to the negative x over 10 du 3dx. So we can simplify this. P of x equals negative 30 x times e to the negative x over 10. The double negative becomes a positive, and then I'll have the integral of 30 e to the negative x over 10 dx. All right, so this antiderivative, this one's not too bad. We already did one like this in the problem. So we have negative 30x times e to the negative x over 10. The 30 is a constant that's multiplying this function, so I'll keep that there in front of it. So I need an antiderivative of e to the negative x over 10, but we've already done that. That's negative 10 e to the negative x over 10. This was an indefinite integral, so let's put a plus c at the end of it. Alrighty, so we have this function for P of x. Ultimately, remember, we said we want to find P of 10. This was my goal. I'm going to need to plug 10 into my profit function at some point. I can't do it just yet because I don't know what c is. That would stop me from getting a final answer. So let's solve for c. And usually the way we solve for c is we plug in given information. And we have information about the fixed costs, which involve plugging in 0 for the x. So we're going to plug in 0 for the x. So if we do that, on the left-hand side, we'll get P of 0. On the right-hand side, we'll get negative 30 times 0 times e to the 0. And then 30 times negative 10 is negative 300 times e to the 0 plus c. So to find the profit of 0 items, I need to be able to simplify this and somehow connect it to the fixed costs. So the profit from selling 0 items, well, profit, recall, profit P of x is equal to revenue R of x minus the cost function minus C of x. So if I use that, P of 0 is R of 0. Let's put this in a different color. This is R of 0 minus C of 0. And on the right-hand side, 0 times anything is 0. And then I get minus e to the 0 is 1. So 1 times 300, I'll get 300 plus c. Okay, so R of 0 is the revenue from selling 0 items, which is just 0. So this is 0 because we said the revenue from 0 items, from selling 0 items, should just be $0. We haven't made anything if we've sold no items. Okay, and then the cost, C of 0, we know. Remember, the problem told us C of 0 is 50. Those are the fixed costs. Alrighty, so on the left-hand side, we have negative 50. On the right-hand side, we have negative 300 plus C. And if I isolate C now, we get C equals 250. Alrighty, so now we can plug in and write our profit function. So thus, P of x, our profit function, is negative 30x times e to the negative x over 10. And then what is it? Minus 300 e to the negative x over 10 plus c. And now I know c is 250. And then finally, we're ready to plug in 10 to get the profit from selling 10,000 phones. So if I plug in 10 into this, we'll get negative. Actually, let me give myself some more room here. So P of 10 is negative 30 times 10 times e to the, I'll get negative 10 over 10, which is negative 1, minus 300 e to the negative 1 again, plus 250. Alrighty, so this I can simplify a little bit. So negative 30 times 10, that's negative 300. So I have negative 300 e to the negative 1, and then minus another 300 e to the negative 1. So overall, that's negative 600 e to the negative 1. I can bring this e to the negative 1 to the denominator. So I can rewrite this as negative 600 over e plus 250. Okay, so that's my profit. What were the units? This was in thousands of dollars, so $1,000. If I needed to round this a value, or if I needed to write it in dollars instead of thousands of dollars, I could plug this into a calculator, and if I did that, this ends up being about $29,272.34 if I round it to 2 decimal places, and that's in dollars. So in the next video, we are going to continue our review and look at area between curves.